So okay, so we're on, and welcome everybody. We this time I did not have I wasn't able to get the core team together before we had this meeting, but but I think this is all going to work out. And I think everybody here knows everybody knows Eric, right, from Great Lakes. Great, Eric, do you know everybody on the call, or you want us to go through introductions?
We could do quick introductions.
Yeah, let's do quick introductions. Anyway, so why don't you start, Eric?
Okay, I'm Eric Griffin. I'm the Energy Program Manager for the Great Lakes Water Authority. And on top of the energy stuff, I've done a lot of analytics around our organization. So this group is interesting to me.
Okay, Ting Lu, you're on my screen. You're right next to Eric. So.
All right. Yeah. Hi, Eric. This is Ting Lu. I'm from Clean Water Services. I have worked with the Great Lake before, but nice to meet you. I'm with the business. I'm the business practice leader for digital solutions. So we do a lot of data analytics to support the district here.
Okay, Jenny.
Good morning, I'm Jenny Chaddick, and I'm a process analyst at Tacoma Water. So we're just south of Seattle, and I'm in our system and asset planning group. And so I support our team by doing a lot of our coordination of data visualizations and analytics. So using FME and Tableau and all those sorts of tools.
Excellent. Charlie Stevens.
Good morning, everybody. Charlie Stevens, KC Water. Kansas City, Missouri. So I'm just here kind of an observer. I sit on the Strategic Advisory Committee for the WISE project with WEF and other folks. But we do have some team members from our department participating in this initiative too.
Yes. Yvonne?
Hi, I'm Yvonne Carney. I'm a Director of Strategic Performance at WSSC Water, which is in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. And I lead up a team that facilitates strategic planning and encourages the use of data and risk analysis in decision making. So, good to meet you.
Mike?
Oh, me. Sorry, there's another Mike. Yeah, I'm Mike Barnett. I'm a private consultant. I have a company called HMX, and my job is support for you folks to get your business process modeling done, help with representing that and decision management.
Thank you. And Mike Sweeney?
I'm coming at you from my phone because I'm having trouble getting in, but can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Mike Sweeney with Toho Water Authority. I'm the Director of Innovation Strategic Advancement, which means I get involved with a lot of opportunities, we'll call it, that kind of bend toward technology, but also have people and practice elements to it. I've been in the business water sector for 40 years and have extensive utility experience and some consulting experience as well. Thanks, Cello.
Thank you. Scott, I think everybody knows you. But
I know everybody. Yep.
Okay. Okay. And so let me just jump to the, thing we talked about last time, is that in the first 3 months, we'd like to we'd like to finalize the assessment methodology, and that was developed on a different project on that 5039, and it's still being a work in progress, and also identify what system and modeling analysis tools we were going to use. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, about these assessment methodology. This is what people reported last time, the types of challenges that they have experienced in the past when applying technology to improve performance. And it seems like the things that were at issue seem to be the processes, the lack of collaboration between business units scored higher, which is on the people side. So it gives us a sense that, you know, the technology lacking desired functionality was not like the highest challenge, but it was all these other things that had to do with making technology work properly. And we also got your feedback on the capabilities that are important for you know, making improvements. So it seems like, I mean, what came up on top was defining performance goals, documenting and analyzing business processes, and and then managing data, integrating different technologies. So it seems like we're hitting on some fairly important things with this initiative. So the outcomes that you said you would like to see is strategies to use the data to support our. Excuse me, I'm having these sneeze attacks this morning. Improve data interpretation and presentation. Prove that statistics don't have to lie. That was an interesting one. These are contributions from the people from last meetings. And learn what other utilities have done to define business goals, applying structured approach, and insights to use data to improve operations and service. So to get right oops, there's Mike again.
I got him.
Okay. So to get to the, you know, doing something to start the work, it's really in that cycle of business improvement that we had, where we assess the system maturity, analyze how we're doing right now. So it kind of starts with the assessment. And so that is sort of like for this technology part. And the this is a slide from that other project that I mentioned. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. I'll just have to stay with this way for now. So that we start from the business process and what we're trying to do, we create the business needs. But on the technology side, it's really trying to see, are we sensing, are we collecting data that we need? Are we managing it properly? Do we have proper tools for analytics and insights? And does this information provide better decision support that then helps the business? So this is the sort of cycle counterclockwise in terms of looking at what it is that we have now. So this assessment tool that we've talked about would really help us understand the technology side, which is this part, the right part. And then we have the business process. This is what we're trying to support, is something that people are doing. So I just want to stop for a second at this and see, does this speak to you folks? Do you see any faults? Do you see anything that needs to be clarified or further explained? Okay.
I guess a question, Cello,
Sure.
maybe, I know you guys have been dealing with this more than me, but just looking at it quick. Is number one in the right place, or do you have a business need and then you set up a business process and begin to manage that performance? So kind of reversing 1 and 2. That's a question, I guess, for the group, maybe even.
Yeah, the way it was intended to be is that this thing on the left is really how we do our work. And this is like, you know, really those business processes that we've had. So,
Right.
and that would then generate business needs for technology.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you're correct. The business needs really need to drive the business process and performance. The way this arrow was interpreted here was really, what do we need technology to do for us?
Gotcha.
So maybe I should maybe reword it to make it more clear and say something like, you know, requirements for technology.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that would be a better word. So thank you for that. That really helped the things clarified. So when we talk about assessment, I have 1 to 6 slides that just talk about the kinds of things that we would need to know about before we go into technology. And the first one is sort of like, what are we trying to approve? What's the business process? And the idea is that this assessment would be done around a specific thing that we do, such as, you know, inspecting pump stations, procurement, or something that is very specific that we do. That's why this diagram is, you know, back here again. So this icon in the upper corner means let's figure out what is technology supposed to support, and then figure out what is the scope of this business process. How much do we know about it? How do we measure this success? What are the metrics, and how are measurements used for management and improvement? So I have a set of questions that are about that so that help us get a handle of what is this that we're trying to approve. Then there are in this tool there are proposed questions about these business needs and goals for the selected business process. What category decision support is needed? Are business goals defined? How is performance on needs and goals measured or tracked? So that's just like, what is driving the need for technology? And then there are a set of assessment questions for, are we able to collect and generate the data that we need? What do you need for this process? How much do you know about the data? Where is the data generated? Is it in different departments? And how effective are we in sensing? Do we have and when I say sensing, I don't mean just flow meters, but I also mean like if we're dealing, let's say, with the customer support line, is can people go to the website? Do they need to call a phone number? Can they do it in Facebook? Just anything that helps us sense and generate data to support the business process. So I'll stop so it doesn't turn into a monologue. Does this make sense? And for what we're looking at is a methodology that would help us assess, are we where the problems are? So these are there's a set of questions associated with, are you able to collect the data you need? Does that make sense? What do you think, Ting?
And Cello, I'll throw out there that you're not sharing those detailed questions today, but they are available for people to see, right?
Yes, they're here. I have a whole bunch of them here. So I don't want to sort of overwhelm people with this, but I just wanted to give, Scott is right. This is just an outline of what this assessment tool would look. So for each one of these things, there are 4 or 5 questions that answer these 4 or 5 questions that address these areas. And then we have the same thing for the capability to manage data. Once we have it in, is it easy to get to? Is it shared among other? How can it be accessed? Is it well organized? Is it reliable? Is it complete? Then let me just see something. Okay. So maybe this will be a little bit easier to see. Give me just. So does that make any sense to you? So for example, if we look, let me show you what I mean by that. When we talk about, wait a minute, I'm hitting the wrong button. Sensing. I have the, we could go and say detail, what kind of questions we would ask to figure out if we're collecting the right data. We could say, okay, who benefits from the data that is being generated or sensed? Is it just an individual who's like doing visual inspection or receiving a customer's phone call or calibrating an instrument? Is it members of a team, staff, or manager? So see how complex are the requirements. How do we know about the data that we need? I mean, how much do we know? What knowledge about the data that's generated, is it just like individual team members know how to go get it? It's in SOPs. It's in mature documentation that includes, references to engineering drawings. It's in, it's in mature documentation like BPMN, or it's something that's consistent across the organization. And then scope of data collection, what type of data you need currently or in the future, the methods, which is like for all the stuff that you need. On the left would be how you getting this data? You don't know, or it's manual entry and it's not working for you. It's manual is just fine. It's automated, but it's not working automate. So those would be just questions related to this sensing layer. So we have a set of questions, related to this layer, the data management, analytics, and then decision support. So the idea is that we would run through these things just to see how big is the process that we're trying to, how complex it is. Are we have enough data so that we can then base our plan of attack and how we're going to go about it on a complete, set of information. So I'll just stop and poke at somebody else. Mike, does this make sense to you, Mike Sweeney?
So Cello, I got something first. I'll jump in here.
Sure.
So you have the data sensing and data generated. What's the difference? Is the sensing, is it from the sensors? And then
the reason, yes, but for example, sensing is really, when I said generated it may be that somebody's just filling out a form.
Okay.
So and the people filling out the form could be maybe in different departments.
Mm-hmm.
Who generates that data? So and sensing means in a broader sense of how are we pulling in the data. So for example, if it's a SCADA system, it automatically generates information that it's the primary generator. You may use, how many hours a pump has worked in your maintenance system, but it's generated with the SCADA system.
Okay. I think I understand where you are coming from, Cello. So one is kind of a manually humans are generating the data, fill a form, versus the other is the sensors or machines that it sense the characteristics of the system. Yeah, I just found it might be a lot of terminologies, and people who are working on that maybe get confused with the different terminology here. I'm wondering whether you have a one term for data collected, how data being collected, and then you can drill down to the details in a table, whether this is through SCADA or other things. because a lot of times data analytics team might not be the same person that's going to understand the data source here.
Yeah, so what we were thinking is that first of all, who's going to use the data? Is it going to be like, people all across, which means you need, a lot of integration. How much do you know about it? And this is, what do you need to effectively execute this selected process? In order to do this, do you need to know the real-time information? Do you need to know operational data or historical maintenance data, financial, spatial, engineering, timekeeping? What do you need to support this specific process? And so if you wanted to look at risk, for example, if your business process requires all this data and you find out that it's generated all across the organization, it means that you're dealing with something fairly complex, right? So just to try to put a frame around the, how big is the problem? This doesn't solve anything, but at least tries to identify what the challenges might be. Mm-hmm. And sensing may be an unfortunate sense of the word. Maybe better to say collect data, because when you say sensing, maybe people immediately think, a dissolved oxygen meter or a flow meter or a sensor. So maybe that's, I'd be completely open to using a different word,
So Cello, this kind of feedback is valuable because one of the purposes is to evaluate the tool and improve it, make it better, and make it more practical for users. But as I think Mike Sweeney and Yvonne, who were on the last call, Ting couldn't make that one, but they were saying just how comprehensive all of this is. It just covers almost everything you could think of, and we're not aware, and including the business context, which was that upfront portion that Cello briefly covered. And if you take all of that, it's far more than what, let's say, IT organizations typically cover when they're doing functional requirements. So this is really a good assessment tool that we want to validate and improve so that it can be used for assessment around specific business processes that are trying to be improved through the use of technology.
So if this would help. The other thing is that when we say assessment tool, people sometimes think, oh, it's a survey that you send out. That is not what we're thinking here. What we're thinking is these are guidelines to have, there'll be guidelines that say, these are the, let's say if you actually have a business process, you'll know what the swim lanes are and who is getting involved. Get these people in a room and how to generate this information. So it's not intended to be a survey monkey thing that you send out and then people sweat it. Not at all. It's just really to support a process for figuring out what technology do you need, what are you missing, and stuff like that. Yvonne.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So just a question for, and sorry if you covered this, but like for today's meeting, is the purpose to review for everyone the assessment tool and get feedback, or I guess I'm
yes. What
step back and clarify that.
Yes. So this is only our second meeting.
Yes.
That if we looked at our scope of what, oh, I'm going the wrong. Am I going in the wrong direction now? Okay. What we were talking about, oops. So this is what we talked about last time, what the scope is. So in the first 3 months that we would find, in order for us to be able to follow that improvement methodology, we'd need to start with do we understand what our technology needs are? Do we understand what our challenges are? And then assess, where do we have opportunities? Where do we have weaknesses? So that tool is supposed to support that. So what was the purpose of the call today is to see this is what we have to work with that is not fully baked yet, but it is a start that for tools that would allow us to do those upfront assessment. And just to provide a high-level introduction, not to go to every question and say these are the types of things that would make sense and support and make that technology stack compatible with the methodologies that are, you know, in development. Not to get just to introduce this thing to folks, not to really get immediate feedback on specific questions, but more like, does the framework overall make sense? Does that answer your question, Yvonne?
I think so.
Obviously,
I guess I just feel like it's a lot. It's still, you know, it's just a lot to take in, and I feel like I'm just not sure it's like the best way to provide feed. I don't know. Maybe there's a better way, like if we review it in advance or something, or I don't know.
Yes, I can totally. My concern about sharing it in advance is that it is a lot of stuff, and I thought if people open this, they're just not gonna. You know, it's gonna be overwhelming. So I wanted to provide like at least high-level overview with 6 things that are like on top of it, and then not immediately start going into questions. But
Okay.
So that was really, and you're absolutely right. It is a lot to take in. So I'm sorry, Charlie.
No, I'm going to mute. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. So the hope was that when we look at these different things, that we say, okay, this is where we can start. And let's work on, you know, that first layer of sensing and tune that up so we can see, are we collecting the information that we need? And then select a process as an example to make it tangible. Let's, you know, look at either procurement or whatever the heck it is, you know, the process, and let's see how we would go about it. And then we can start going layer by layer, and then figuring out whether it works, and then testing it in different organizations, adjusting it if it doesn't work, if it's not clear, and so forth.
So Cello, yeah, this slides totally make sense to me, and I appreciate Scott, you're providing some of the contact too. I missed earlier. I think one of the questions also maybe we want to think about is the audience for this methodology approach. So I'm going to just try to see if that I'm on the track for what we are trying to do here. So it sounds like the first is business process and performance management. This is a kind of overarching, a higher level goal that the utility has. And then further to define the business needs. So that's still manager level, the director level, the defining what the business needs. And then from there and to overall think about what are the capabilities, what are the technologies we need to develop here. So that's I look at as a higher level discussions there. And once you define the business needs and the capability requirement, and then you'll move on to having more of an SME level, the team members to work with the IT team, working with the business needs, working with the business side. And then they started to identify, to do this system assessment, right? To look at the data, what are data where we have collected, we have generated, what we are missing, all the way how we define this IWS system to support the decisions, and then ultimately to enhance this enhancement, the capabilities. So it looks like there are 2 kinds of audience for the framework. Is one is a higher level, the second is more at the SME level. So I think the call with this call, most of people are more like on the higher level, or things that it's, you know, this is where we are. In order to, maybe my suggestion is to provide you the kind of detailed level things. How does this framework, how does this assessment and all the metrics that we can fill in? It might be good also to bring in some of the SMEs in as we are looking to the details and whether this makes sense, just to make it practical when we apply to examples there. So this is kind of where I'm understanding as I'm listening here. But I'm open to how others are seeing how this could benefit and apply to the utility, because I think that's what we are all trying to do, and take the model here and to apply to use it within our utility.
Yes, Mike Sweeney.
Okay, I'm going to trigger off of Ting's remark there, actually everybody's, and try to synthesize something here and then do it on the fly. So let me lower my hand there we go. I'm thinking that there are maybe two audiences, but I think what unifies maybe the audiences is around, and Scott, you'll have an appreciation for this idea. Maybe it applies, maybe not, but there's the 5 cores of asset management, the core questions, that maybe we can apply that similar approach to data analytics. You know, starting with basically what data do I have, what condition is it in, you know, so forth. We don't have to do it right now, but there are, you know, maybe more than 5 questions, but there'll be, I think, some universal overarching questions that everybody wants to answer with their data, and apply technology, you know, apply the tools that are there. This doesn't, what I'm saying doesn't change these later slides at all, because I think we need to know what tools are out there and so forth, what people are currently using, and what's out there that we're not using. That's where the SME part of Ting's remark maybe comes in, where we need to hear from the SMEs that know these tools and can relate them in their experiences to us and what the capabilities are. But ultimately, we're trying to answer, I think, generally speaking, a finite number of categorical questions. And I think it's possible we can tease those out pretty quickly and make this even maybe a little bit more accessible because of its comprehensive nature, if we maybe consider that approach.
Well, Mike, along those lines, this is organized around 6 different areas, right? And there's a macro question for each one of those, kind of along the lines that you were talking. And it seems like, so you could basically take those one at a time and go through those, or you could pick a particular business process, for example, to you know, as part of that, or as a reference point as you go through it. I think that those are kind of what's been discussed here a little bit. And I think Yvonne's question about, well, how do we organize this? How do you organize this so that we bite off the appropriate chunks and step through this, and then so that you can apply it to a specific business process in your own utility. And maybe it's too much for everyone to pick a business process and do that at the same time, but that seems like a threshold question. Do you pick a business process and through that lens, you know, hit each one of these 6 questions, these different subject areas, really, and then we're kind of reviewing the tool, making sure that it applies. Some of that information has come out here in this call, actually, but that would be, I mean, so figuring out a systematic way to step through it. And I know Cello has some ideas on that, and maybe the rest of you do too. You know, Mike, Yvonne, Ting, you're all getting at the same kind of thing.
Right. I guess what you're also saying, Scott, and maybe Cello, is that we're not, in our remarks just now, we're not too far off. It's just maybe a matter of clarity and accessibility to what it is that we're trying to do. And honestly, I don't know what the 6 areas are, so and we don't need to, we're short on time here today, but I think those ought to be maybe more readily apparent to us on the call than maybe they are a little bit more hidden right now. At least for me, they are.
Yeah, if you look at what's on the screen right now, those were the 6 that I was looking at, but which are basically the way that the analytics are currently organized.
I see.
And,
okay.
Yeah, and so you could start if you wanted, and Ting raised the question, depends kind of on who's on the call or who needs to be on the call and that kind of thing, but you could start out with the business process and performance management, the context, the business context, really, and the business needs. That's kind of what you start with in the analysis, and then you kind of go into data collection or sensing, collecting data, and then the management of data, the analytics, the decision support. Those were the different aspects that were being covered here. And of course, Cello will correct me on what I got wrong on that, but I'm trying to just kind of get it so in some chunks so we can understand and attack basically as a team.
Well, you've definitely made it more obvious for me. I get that. It may be,
Yeah.
So I'll just stop there for now.
No, same here. I think it's actually this the pretty comprehensive slide. The more I'm looking at, and Scott, you were talking about 6 areas. I didn't recognize that the 6 areas, and you kind of also grouped in on the right side. Grouped the number 1 and 2. What I see is a more like a higher level business side versus the 3, 4, 5, 6, the SME level to look into the details. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of information in these slides.
It turns out, Ting, that number 1 and 2 apply to all business processes, not just for technology. And so that's kind of a new portion here, but it's something that's going to be an assessment that can be used with all, for the business processes overall, or specifically for any business process that the other teams are engaged in as well. So this is a real advancement. At least speaking for myself, I haven't seen this comprehensive work in this area where it breaks it down like this. Not just for the business portion, but for the rest. And we've been led here to the structure that's on this chart.
So I think you are correct. Here I was trying to show that on each of these layers there are some things that the business side needs to do. This is the blue boxes. And some stuff which technology side, which I think you may refer to when you say SMEs. So when it comes to sensing and collection, the business side needs to say, what is it that we need to collect? And then the technology side needs to say, okay, how good are we? How capable are we about collecting? When it comes to data management, this is actually, to define the data and information architecture required to support business goals, that is more an SME thing, But the analytics, again, the need requirements for analytics also have to come from the business as far as decision support. So there is, it takes different. It takes different parts of your organization, and if we actually want to look at designing to be, maybe we should start the other way and say these are the decisions that we want to support. What data did we need to collect? So what I showed earlier was the as is, but this is designing a new system. Wouldn't it be better? I'll give you a couple of examples. In the district where I still work, my day job, they have about, I think, 60 or 70% of the instrumentation in treatment plants supports HART protocol. They're using 0 of that. 0, nothing. So why did they buy instruments that include HART protocol if they didn't want to use them? So if another example, if we look at this, this intelligent water system stack, AWWA has this, report that comes out. They goes to many agencies. Scott will probably know how many, like hundreds, right, Scott? Mm-hmm. And they come back and talk about asset management, and 11% of them say, this is self-reported, that they have a well-defined asset registry. Okay, so if the numbers show a disconnect between what technology can do and how much benefit we're getting out of it. Because if we look at each one of these levels, when you buy a piece of software, it's the people who configure it. It's the people who define the hierarchy, the taxonomy, the nomenclature, and if it's not done across the board consistently, integration becomes very difficult. So that's why use of technology has been more effective on more narrow and targeted things. Like, okay, we have a SCADA system and operators are happy with it. Are you using that data for CIP planning? Are you using it for maintenance management? I don't know. Or we have a CMMS that works well for the people in maintenance. Well, is that data being taken into account in the CIP? Is that when somebody, and as far as analytics and things, how do you, so as we try to look at things systematically, it means we start looking at interactions between these things. Then, and we are getting out of these silos that are either in organizations or in our thinking or in tools and stuff like that. So I completely understand that looking at this for the first time is a little bit maybe disorienting, or it seems like it's too much.
Cello, if you go to that other chart that you had, that table with the stacks in it of that one, I think that the other piece that we haven't talked about, which can kind of fit here, is that there is a maturity level associated with each of the questions within each one of these boxes. And right. So, a way to think of this, one way to slice and dice this would be first go through, whether you start with like the business side and what the needs are, whether you start with the bottom and then go to the top, or whether you dive right into the collection of data, what data do you need to collect? How do you manage your data? What analytics are needed for the data? What decision support is needed? Is really those big questions, Mike. But the detailed questions within each one of these stacks also has maturity level in it. So if you are evaluating these questions, and does that cover the ground? Does it, within each one of these boxes, if you accept this overall methodology, then you can take a particular process and you can say, let's evaluate a particular process looking at what you have now as is versus to be, what you need, what you want or need based on that evaluation that you do. So, it's kind of a question, and we only have, 10 minutes, but in where we go from here. But back to Yvonne's original kind of question is, how do we as a team proceed through this? Or do we do it as a team? Does a core team, kind of go work on it and report back? Or, what's the methodology that you want to use? But hitting each one of these, the sensing and collection, data management, analytics, decision support, looking at those areas kind of one by one, that's an alternative, and say, does this capture what would be needed there? And then once that whole exercise is finished, and you could take one of those each meeting, for example, by the time you finish getting through that, then you'd be ready to take specific business processes and apply this to them in terms of identifying as is and working towards to be.
My sense is that this looks more complicated. Yvonne, we'll get back to it immediately. It looks more complicated than it actually is. If we take it a little bit slow, a piece at a time, you know, like Chinese food, you know, piece at a time, you don't try to swallow the whole thing. And we look at it carefully, you'll see that if you actually apply it, it's not that big of a deal. It's really not. These questions are not that difficult to answer, and they can be changed. We can change them, adjust them, but it's too much when it gets all presented at once. Yvonne?
I guess I'm thinking that like the tool itself is probably fabulous, and I probably don't need to tweak it. But I'm more thinking, and others on the call may or may not be feeling this too. I'm more thinking about like, how do I get people who normally like, I think Scott said, like this is thinking about things more than maybe has ever been thought of before. And the requirements that IT does today is like a little tiny, like, you know, sliver of this. So, and it is different people in an organization, you know, business and technology that again are like normally never together on this, or at least I can say are not normal. And then added on like that most people are kind of, you know, doing their day job, which doesn't involve being this thoughtful about data. So I'm more in my head thinking about like, how do you step people through like gaining their support and not overwhelming them, but doing it in a way that like helps them contribute to their piece of it, but again, doesn't overwhelm them, but then you end up with something at the end. But I do think I would challenge, I think, Cello, this is really hard. Like these individually may not be hard questions, but just what we would be called to do to bring those people to the table, I do think is time intensive and hard. Even if the individual questions are not hard, like just the idea in my head of getting people to work together who don't normally work together, that's kind of hard.
I agree. The first time we had our very first meeting on UA was in 2017 Utility Management Conference. We had an all-day in-person workshop, and all day we talked about nothing else, only business process modeling. By that time, utilities, there were much fewer utilities, but they made bigger contributions. They've already committed to the project. Each one of them pulled me after the all day and said, what exactly are we doing here? What do we get at the end of this thing? And now these same folks are going forward with business process modeling, and so I think if we don't think about the entire organization, we just carefully choose a business process to apply this to, it will work. It will work, and it will. You will take the pain up front, not at the back end, not when people get the system and start rebelling.
But like Cello, I agree it will work, but like I can't make this presentation.
No.
So what I'm saying is like maybe a useful part for this group for us to contribute is not to review this assessment, but like to think about and contribute to how to actually like convince people to do it.
Mike and Ting both have their hands raised, and just quickly, this group has to understand it before you can explain it. So part of it is first understanding what's there, right? But Mike and Ting.
Ting, you want to go first?
Mike was first.
Go ahead, Mike. You're first.
Okay, I'm kind of where Yvonne is, and maybe stating it a different way. Cello, you might be right. I got to look at things from a deliverable standpoint, and I think that's where it gets still a little bit fuzzy for me. I agree that you're explaining the kind of the zen of doing stuff to, improve it in 4 different categories here. I get that. You start with a gap and, whatever it is, and you're bridging the gap and implementing something, a plan and all that. Totally get that. So where I get nervous is the deliverable at the end of this year. What do we come out with? And I know it's fuzzy kind of for a reason, because you're still gauging maybe the capacity of each one of us to really, dive in and do something real. But I guess, and maybe there's a slide later that gets into this a bit better than I'm explaining it. But what I'm thinking is if we even got maybe a little less ambitious on the deliverables, is maybe we could prototype a type of a business process that would be sensor based. I've got a treatment plant. I've got what Ting has for the Tualatin River, depending upon sensors and making decisions and things like that. She's already doing some data analytics and such there. And there may be a second category that's not sensor based. It's more of a business application where there's a database out there that I want to be able to tease out some relationships and things like that. Maybe a little bit more of a big data type of thing that people are interested in. And yeah, that's Power BI. It's what Mike Barnett has, a really great tool out there. We've looked at it, trying to figure out how we maybe make it work. And I don't know if there's a third or not. And it may be too much for the first year. But we could come up with something, and then everybody as part of this team could contribute to it. How would we apply that slide to each one of those pieces? And we can build, I think, a case history pretty quickly that way, and start getting some momentum, and maybe be able to take on a third one or maybe a fourth one.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. Ting Lu.
Yeah, I kind of having the thoughts along the lines with Yvonne and Mike here. I think it works best if we are doing some use cases and also learning this as we are doing the use cases here. So I think for the next call, maybe we can all think about how this applies and pick some use cases here. The other one on the deliverable, I feel the same with the utilities, the limited resource and time. I think maybe another question for us to think about, how does this process or this model applies? It might not apply to a process or technology project that's only impacting 5 people with a limited budget there, because this is really going to be beneficial for utility-wide, the process change impacting hundreds of people versus just a few people. So we might want to think about those applications and things that this applies the best, so people don't feel immediately, oh, I'm going to go through this process for every single project I need to do. So I think there will be some pushback from there.
Really good point.
Yeah, the only other thing, Scott, you asked how we kind of work through this. The other thought I have is maybe we have this slide stack, and I found each time we're only going through like 3 or 4 slides, and we have so many questions, very comprehensive. Maybe we can pick one. I think today I learned 2 things. It's one is that comprehensive slides in the 6 areas. So I learned that, and I'm on board with that. And I looked at your table with the different kind of and I like that too. And maybe we just pick one or 2 things at a time, and we can all provide the feedback and things and making sure we're good with this, and then we move on to the next.
Okay, Charlie?
Again, just to, observing what's being said and looking at the slides that's been shown, I guess kind of a question for the group. Since you're going to be the one, doing the deeper dive and driving this thing. So I like the idea if you had a utility, I guess an idea to think about, if you had a utility that had a business need that had not been developed, right? So work that all the way through the problem. And then if you had another utility, and I wouldn't, you try to find a utility that doesn't have a really tough business need, right? So try to find a simpler one, and then find a utility that has an existing business case that wants to change it, right? The technology change piece, like you brought up towards the end, Cello,
Yeah.
and then get to partnering with them on that 2B state. and then I think you'd have some good business case. Like you were saying, Mike, that you could present, right? Some use cases. Just some other thoughts. I listened to what you all are saying here towards the end and trying to simplify it, I guess, in my head. And that way you have some, maybe there's 4 of them, right? So you got 2 on the two that has the need, and then you have 2 that already have an existing business case that they want to modify, but then digging into that on the technology side. So just a couple thoughts.
So we're at the top of the hour, but it sounds like there's some consensus around picking something, and maybe between the leads, you figure out what maybe that could be, and then it's stepping through each of those stacks, and answering those questions and applying it to something, and then maybe going on to other ones, during the year. Was
the reason why we wanted to focus on a process is, I understand Mike needs to go, is because we wanted to make it tangible, meaningful for the organization, and have relatively quick wins. We can I will share all the slides with all the questions the way they are right now. So we'll post them and send you a link after this meeting. And I totally agree that what we do need to be scalable, which means we don't want to boil the ocean, and we start on a vertical thing. We implement it on a limited, where it's not, the entire organization, and it has to bring value immediately to a specific thing rather than trying to, contemplate forever. So I will, I'll just stop the recording now, but what I'm going to do